Pleasure Island at Walt Disney World was a 6-acre man-made island in downtown Disney that featured a number of nightclubs where guests looking to keep their vacation going could drink, dance, and celebrate New Year's Eve every evening. After almost 20 years, the island finally closed its doors. Was poor planning on Disney's part the reason why? That's kind of a vague question, so let me specify. Did the poor planning around the layout of downtown Disney and its expansions ultimately result in the closure of Pleasure Island? As far as Disney's official stance, we'll probably never know, but otherwise it seems that it played a part. In order to dig into why, we first need to look at the history of Pleasure Island. Back in the mid-1980s, when Michael Eisner took over as Disney's new CEO, he became very concerned with trying to keep guests on Disney property. There was a lot of money involved in a Walt Disney World vacation, and he felt there was no reason why that money shouldn't go into Disney's pocket instead of the middlemen outside of the company. He pushed for building more owned and operated resorts on Disney property so that guests would stay at their hotels over outside chains. He expanded the resort from 2 theme parks to 4 in order to give people a reason to stay longer. All of that was great, but one problem was that at the end of the day when the parks closed, there wasn't much left to do. Adult guests would head to downtown Orlando for its nightlife scene, which was growing with the popularity of places like Church Street Station. So Disney too decided it was time to get into the nightlife game. They dug out a canal through a piece of downtown Disney, which at the time was called Walt Disney World Village, and built 6 nightclubs on the man-made island. They ranged from techno clubs to comedy clubs to the cult favorite, the Adventurers Club. Borrowing the name from Pinocchio and given its own original backstory, the island was dubbed Pleasure Island. After going over budget more than 3 times its original estimate of $30 million, and after being delayed for over a year, Pleasure Island opened on May 1st, 1989, the same day as Disney MGM Studios. As part of the opening, Walt Disney World Village was rebranded as the Disney Village Marketplace. When it first opened, the business model for the island was such that guests were able to freely come and go on the island itself, but the clubs themselves had a cover fee. This model resulted in long lines outside of the clubs and confusion from guests who didn't know where they could or couldn't go. So as a result, the following year in 1990, they switched over to a gated island model. At 7 p.m., guests would have to pay a flat $10 fee to enter the island, which would grant them access to all 6 clubs. This not only helped with the crowds and lines, but it also encouraged guests to explore the different clubs throughout the night. It also allowed Disney to offer outside entertainment. Disney felt they needed a hook to relaunch the island and clear up the confusion of the initial year. One idea was to have the island celebrate New Year's Eve every night of the year, complete with party favors, outdoor music, a countdown, and fireworks. It was a bit confusing at first, but ultimately it worked, and Pleasure Island became a popular nightlife spot for both Disney guests and Orlando locals. Things were great. Then, in 1997, the area would see a significant change that may very well have been the beginning of the downfall for Pleasure Island. The Disney Village Marketplace was once again rebranded. The original area was still considered the Marketplace, and Pleasure Island was still Pleasure Island. However, in addition to the 2 areas, a new section to the west of Pleasure Island opened under the name of the West Side, featuring Disney Quest along with a few new restaurants and venues. Together, all 3 areas were collectively now known as Downtown Disney. Here's where the problem comes in. The way Downtown Disney was laid out, the easiest way to get from the Marketplace to the West Side was through Pleasure Island, and after 7 p.m., that island was closed off. For guests who didn't want to pay to get onto Pleasure Island, they had to go back to the Downtown Disney parking lot area to go around the island. It wasn't the end of the world, but it wasn't convenient either. A number of years later, in 2004, Disney would once again revert Pleasure Island back to its original setup. Guests would be able to once again wander on and off the island for free while paying for access separately to the clubs. While this did solve the traffic flow problems of downtown Disney, it also meant the eventual retiring of some of the outdoor activities on the island. By the next year, Disney would discontinue the nightly New Year's Eve celebrations. Bit by bit, Pleasure Island was losing part of the charm that made it stand out to guests looking for a good time. Eventually, it was announced that in September of 2008, Pleasure Island would close in order to be replaced by various shopping and dining spots. It was going to be rebranded and rethemed to an area called Hyperion Wharf. But after constant delays, the project went nowhere until a few years later when Disney would unveil their plans for a complete transformation of downtown Disney into Disney Springs. So was the placement of the West End the reason why Pleasure Island closed? Well, I don't think so. I think it played a significant part as the changes to the island to deal with the flow of guests ultimately led to Pleasure Island losing parts of what made it special. That said, there's usually more than one reason behind a change that significant. For one, it's argued that the clubs began to show their age. Disney is not particularly known for staying on the cutting edge of popular trends. There's also the fact that Disney parks were staying open later over time, and the resort was growing and offering more to do in the evenings, giving guests more options outside of Pleasure Island to keep busy. Again, with something like this, there will probably never be an official answer. But the changes and the eventual fate of Pleasure Island serve as a good example of just how important something as seemingly simple as layout can be to the life of an attraction or land at Walt Disney World.